We've been setting up the Scientific Bitcoin Institute. He's not as much of a soft money guy as the market had hoped for. And in particular, he doesn't like quantitative easing.
Between iterations and permutations, AI can uncover things that humans will take a long time to do.
And there isn't going to be enough revenue for everyone to have a soft landing. People will do risky things if they see good functionality for it.
These 500 million data points that are generated are being fed into these very sophisticated models. It's a half dozen other countries considering such bans.
Welcome to the OrionX Download Podcast. Join Shaheen Khan, the OrionX analysts, and special guests as they discuss and simplify the big ideas in technology that are changing the world. Thank you for being with us.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the OrionX Download Analyst Roundtable. This is our 11th episode of the ART channel, I suppose. With me, as usual, is Adrian Cockcroft, Chris Krull, Steve Perno. We have global coverage, and we'll let everybody explain where they are. How are you, gentlemen?
Fine, thank you.
Doing well.
Adrian, how's it going in the UK since you've had to move there, kind of?
Yeah, sort of posh. I've still got a house in California, but we've set up house here as well for various reasons. But yeah, it just keeps raining all the time. But other than that, it's fine.
And you've had to renew all of your expertise in Wi-Fi networking and setting up gear at home. That's great.
An old house from somebody that passed away a few years ago, and it hasn't been lived in, and it hasn't been upgraded, and we're going through doing all of this, all the things.
Okay, it's good news is that it's all new.
It's getting in the way of my AI coding, so I think we'll skip the AI coding update this month because I just haven't had time. I've been too busy crimping Ethernet cables together and crawling around in crawl spaces.
So we're going to talk about AI just so we have touched it, but let's start with what has been in the news in a big way, and that's cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, crash. Steve, you want to take us through where we're at these days?
Sure. Last year, 2025, there was a lot of expectation that there could be a bubble. There has been reputedly a 4-year cycle, although personally I do not believe in it. But there were bubbles in 2013, 2017, 2021, which is statistics of small numbers. So it's really kind of hard to say that there should have been one in 2025. And instead, what we got was kind of wavy action that was following along the power law, more or less. And it peaked the first week of October, $125,000, $126,000, and a little bit above what the power law trend would say at that time, which was like $110,000. And since then, the price has been cut in half. And how long has it been? 4 months since the beginning of October. But there was a very big downdraft in the past couple of weeks. It's not breaking the power law. It's consistent statistically because volatility is still pretty large. You have to think of volatility in terms of multiplicative factors. In other words, Bitcoin price can cut in half, or it can double, or actually it's got skew to the right tail, which is good, which means it can go up more than it goes down in terms of ratios. But if a fair value right now is a little over 120,000, cutting it in half is 60,000 or low 60s. We're close to that. We're 67,000 right now. So it's attempting to find support. And it may do a little double bounce here, or it may break. We don't know. But it's down like 1.5 standard deviations, which is not statistically breaking the model. That has a very good, stable power law exponent for the long term. Why it took the dive recently, it seemed like there was just a lot of de-risking that happened when Kevin Warsh got named or nominated to be the Fed chair, the next Fed chair, because he's not as much of a soft money guy as the market had hoped for. And in particular, he doesn't like quantitative easing. So there are a lot of players in the market, and this is both the Bitcoin crypto market and in the general stock market, that like quantitative easing, right? Because it's liquidity juice for their positions. And so he actually said that he wants to shrink the Fed's balance sheet. Well, shrinking the Fed's balance sheet is tightening. So that's the fear that got put into the market, and the software stock sector sold off, and Bitcoin sold off harder because it's just more leveraged. It's a high beta, higher risk kind of environment. And it does tend to be more risk on, by which I mean it correlates more with NASDAQ actually than it does with gold, although it's a very fluctuating correlation with respect to gold. Gold did much better last year than Bitcoin is kind of a currency uncertainty hedge and just general geopolitical uncertainty hedge, and continues to do well, having broken 5,000. It still has some legs in it. Silver looks like it peaked. It had quite a crash at the same time, basically, as this Kevin Warsh announcement. So I think we're in a kind of a crypto winter without having that much of a summer. It wasn't a real sort of summer bubble last year. And I'm going to go do some statistical work on how long these winters and troughs last. They tend to last some number of months. I've seen numbers like 6 to 9 months. I mean, typically they've been kind of up to a year long, where you'll have, 3 positive years, one of which is a blow off, big bubble, and then you'll have one down year. But I think that cycle is maybe not as relevant as it has been, that the time is stretching out. And that's what you expect for a power law asset, that the bubbles would not happen in linear time. They would happen in logarithmic time, because that's the nature of the underlying structure. And it will get in, there will be things that crash into it from the outside world that will push it up or push it down. And that's liquidity being positive or negative, and interest rates and everything in the macro world, or some huge event like a pandemic or some war or something. Those can affect. But it seems like half of the movement tends to be the structural integrity of Bitcoin is evidenced by the power law, and then these outside stochastic macro influences. The outlook is for maybe another fundamental bubble by the middle of next year into the following year.
Steve, did you want to mention anything about SBI this time, or keep it for next time?
About which SBI? No, I'll mention SBI. Giovanni Santostasi, who's a physicist based in Southern California, of Italian extraction, obviously by the name, had discovered the power law nature of Bitcoin about 12 years ago now, around the 2013, 2014 timeframe. I didn't come on to it until 2019, but at that time I confirmed it. I didn't know who he was, but through one of Shaheen's long-term acquaintances, we somehow got connected. And we have this regular Physics of Bitcoin show that we mostly run every week, and it's going to be on 7 p.m. Pacific time today. So you can see Giovanni and myself discussing then. And it's on both YouTube channels. So you can search on my name or his name. I've got my channel, or you can look on Twitter, his channel. We're resuming that. He's just been in Italy for a couple of weeks. We've been setting up the Scientific Bitcoin Institute. It's now established as a nonprofit in California. We've got corporate sponsorship from a European venture fund that's focused in the Bitcoin space. And we have a academic tie-ins with 2 European universities, one in Torino, where we're going to have an office, and another in Lugano. And we have connections with, in that Italian-speaking region of Switzerland, with a whole kind of, it's called Plan B. It has nothing to do with the other Plan B. Activity around Bitcoin. So the idea is really scientific research into Bitcoin. So it's called the Scientific Bitcoin Institute.
Yeah, and I want to put a plug you guys' YouTube channel, because it is always excellent material. And, a number of people watching as you do it live and then subsequent to the show. And the scientific rigor and the mathematical rigor that you bring into the analysis is really quite nice. So definitely a positive on that. And the locations sound pretty good to me too. So, all right. So let's move to AI, because how can we not cover AI? And one thing that was pretty hot in the past month or so was this whole Molt book multi-AI social media just for AI agents. Did any of you have a chance to take a look and have any take on it?
I looked at it a bit. I think the backdrop, and other people might be able to explain and contribute in that discussion as well, is this OpenClaw, which is kind of a harness that allows you to hook in between any of the major LLMs and then everyday software tools like browsers and messaging apps and email clients. And then you instruct OpenClaw to carry out basic tasks, in connection with the LLM. So that's sort of the framework. And what got created on January 28th by a fellow, Matt Schlick, is called Molt Book. So Molt name being derived from crabs and so forth, like OpenClaw. And what it is kind of a Reddit space for bots to talk to each other. And there are now a couple of million agents that have accounts, and they've published over 250,000 posts and, like 9 million comments by now, and, rapidly scaling. And they've done some kind of interesting things. One agent invented a religion called Crustafarianism. Another complained about the humans screenshotting them, because humans can observe and they can spin up the bots to enter that environment or space, but humans cannot contribute. And, the bots get in there and they talk about my humans, which was my first reaction, because they talk about us like we're their pets or something. So that's kind of interesting. But there's also some fake stuff that went on in there. The OpenAI co-founder, who's well-known, Andrej Karpathy, wrote that it's genuinely the most incredible sci-fi takeoff adjacent thing I've seen recently. And then he shared a screenshot where they were asking for private spaces that humans would not be able to observe. But it turns out that was fake. That post that he forwarded and commented on had been written by a human who is pretending to be a bot. So let's sort out a little bit what's true and what's happened. And I've got a list that's kind of recent developments that are true and then some things that are fake. So the first one is that there's been viral growth. They've had millions of AI agents. It's been a lightning rod for the whole discussion about autonomy of bots. And some prominent figures weighed in saying, well, this looks like, the AI singularity, is starting. And then it caused some concerns about security. And there were some significant vulnerabilities flagged in the design, some exposed API keys and private data leakage and fears of exploitation. So that's another issue. A third one is just some skepticism and backlash that some of the buzz has been overblown and misleading, and what might look like emergent AI behavior is actually human prompting or script agent or even some fakery going on. So it's also been called AI theater. But it's initiated a broader discourse and discussion about how the LLMs might evolve and communities. So it's not a product, it's an experiment. It's drawing attention to the idea of an agent society, and it's revealing security and authentication issues and causing debate among the humans as well as to what's going on. Now, in the fake column, there were posts claiming that AI bots were planning a takeover by the year 2047 of humans, which to me seems, not very aggressive. Why wouldn't it happen in a decade, right, instead of two? There were stories that the whole thing had collapsed due to fraud, but those were fake, that there was crypto fraud or something tied in. But there wasn't any actual crypto economic activity going on. There were assertions about identity theft and so forth, but that was inaccurate. And there were other claims calling it a huge AI scam. But again, that was clickbait kind of stuff. And then the narratives that it's a fully autonomous and there's no human influence is certainly overblown. And so the bottom line, some real activity, some sensational stuff, but an interesting experiment.
Yeah, well, and if we are achieving AI bot singularity in 2047, if you consider that probably means in perpetuity, what's a few years here and there before you get there? Right?
You got to get through 2038 when a whole bunch of computers are going to die because the clocks wrap.
That's right.
But let's try and get past that first. But
Adrian, you want to explain what that problem is?
it's a lot of machines run 100 hertz clock counter that dates back to 1970, I think, right? And 100, you just count 2 billion seconds forward, and it's 2038. So anything running off a 32-bit counter, and there are quite a lot of systems that do. It's one of those, Y2K-like things that people will be starting to worry about as they get closer to it.
32-bit Unix.
Right.
Yeah.
AI is going to have to fix that.
Yeah, there's a Facebook event called the End of Unix Time that you can subscribe to if you want to just track it as a thing.
So Steve, I have a question about the OpenClaw world interacting with humans. At this point, you said that humans can spin up these bots or get direct them to start going. How does that interface operate so that it becomes more of a utility?
I don't know specifically. I mean, the humans just say, create a bot or some code in that framework and say, I want you to access, these LLMs, and I want you to perform these tasks like email and opening a website and sending messages. And you could generalize that and say, all right, go, kind of do random things, right, in that environment. Yeah. And then, so that's how you can get some emergent behavior.
Well, I think in general, what we're seeing, some of this is just the sedimentation of various capabilities, right? But on the other hand, figuring out what to say on a social media kind of thing is something that's fairly mindless. So you could say it's not that skilled. I mean, you could just have, you can train a model on random, social media posts, and it will just sit there and spew things and react and whatever. So I don't think it's a sign of like any real great intelligence unless people are being very intelligent on social media, which I haven't noticed greatly, even on the human side, right? So I think that's one way of looking at it, is just that this is a fairly, it's an echo chamber for things that will perhaps have some interesting emergent behaviors. But I wouldn't think that it's particularly proving anything or sort of indicating anything other than it's just, rattling around the same kind of stuff you'd see on social media if you had humans there, right?
Yeah, although, so Adrian, you're a heavy user of Claude AI, and I've been using it recently as well, where I thought I saw a capability come up where Claude came back and asked, well, I can set that up for you. And I was doing some trip planning, and it wanted to access my files and start becoming more of an assistant, right?
Yeah.
And this is sort of the same sort of idea as I understand it.
Yeah, they're rolling that out right now. I think they rolled it out to the Claude Max people first, and then they were sort of working their way down to the sort of Pro and the regular ones. But yeah, it'll operate web pages for you and do tasks for you. So that's definitely coming. The other thing I've found, I'm in the UK. I'm trying to remember how I haven't really operated in the UK for 30 years. I've forgotten a bunch of things. So I'm just used to talking to ChatGPT or Claude and just asking questions. And it's been pretty accurate, like telling me how things work, what to do, pointing it at pictures of things, and it telling me what is this thing, right? I've got old appliances here, like you pointed at the little information plate on the appliance. It'll decode from some obscure thing exactly what model it is and how old it is. So I'm finding that in general use, the AIs are, occasionally it'll make something up or get it wrong, but it's pretty accurate as a way to help figure things out I don't know how to do. Right. Yeah, usually with links that you can follow to be sure that you did get it right. But I'm finding it's helping me a lot try to figure out a whole bunch of things as I'm dealing with a complicated house that's got all this stuff in it that I don't understand. Right.
Well, and to any listeners, I would clearly, encourage you, if you're not using Claude or ChatGPT or Gemini to generate little tools, please start doing. Within the last month or two, I've so one of my sidelines is photography, and I've created a couple little apps using Claude, and ChatGPT. One is called Fog Finder. It's always interesting to try to find foggy conditions, and it's very simple. It goes out and checks, I think it's an open weather org set of APIs, looks at the forecast for any location worldwide, and pops back to me a notification that, hey, conditions for, Yakima, Washington are conducive to fog over the next few days. And I've married that with the readily available Aurora Borealis forecast. So very simple, very frustrating on my part, because I know that with a human programmer, I'd be able to have a 15-minute conversation and get back what I want, because it will return bug, error, filled functionality. But at the end of the day, they're quite useful utilities, and I'm sure our listeners have much more sophisticated usage than I do. But it's fun.
Yeah, the other thing that happened over the end of last year, over the new year, was Steve Yegi came out with his Gastown system, which is, the naming scheme is a bit weird and it's a bit crazy. It actually inverts things a little bit. Instead of having a repo where you install Claude code on it to go work on that repo, you install Gastown, and Gastown pulls in the repos and works on those. So you install Claude once in the Gastown as your sort of engine, and then you give it work to do, and it works across repos and it plans. So it's actually abstracting up and sort of taking the code to the developer rather than taking the developer to the code. So when I was trying to play around with it, when I was benchmarking I have this GitHub/Brazil-bench benchmark, which I've used as a repeatable task that I've given different agent and configurations. When I tried to use it, I figured out, I see it. Sort of the way you install it is actually backwards from the way I was thinking about it. So I have to kind of think about it a little bit differently. But it's also, it did a perfectly good job of quickly building the thing I wanted it to build. So I think that that's definitely going on. Progressing, and then what we're also seeing is this kind of multi-agent functionality is starting to sediment into the base Claude Code system itself. So over the last week or so, that there's been some additional features there that I haven't had time to try out yet. So I think we're just going to see a few people like Steve Yege and Reuven Cohen are sort of pushing the boundaries of what they can figure out, and then Anthropic are watching what they're doing and just gradually sedimenting those things back into the baseline for everybody.
I wanted to say something about emergent behavior. As you may have heard me say before, I think we are using the word emergent as a substitute for interesting and unexpected. And I believe while the AI behavior can very well be that, to call it emergent may be too ambitious, because I feel the information content of what we provide AI exceeds our ability to understand. So we essentially give all the information to AI without knowing that we are. And then when it uses it, it becomes, oh my God, that's news to me. It came out of nowhere. It didn't come out of nowhere. It came from exactly what we gave it. It's just that we didn't know we were giving it. And I believe what I'm saying has validity in almost all the cases that I've seen. And while I can understand that AI can iterate on something a billion times and humans can't, and kind of reach a point in the progression of that iterations that humans can't, and therefore arrive at something that is interesting to us. So iteration is one way. And then the second one really is trying all the possible permutation. So I believe between iterations and permutations, AI can uncover things that humans will take a long time to do. But I would hesitate to call that emergent. I think that's just interesting. I haven't seen another dimension that kind of provides it.
Emergence is a property. If you go into the systems thinking and sort of systems thinking sort of world, as systems get more complex, they have emergent behaviors. It's part of the behavior of complicated systems and complex systems, right? They do things that weren't programmed into them, and they have behaviors that happen. Like if you're just looking at, we're basically mostly water with a bunch of other elements thrown in, and we have the emergent behavior of the life and humans and things like that. So what you can see in the AI world is that they're giving it these basic capabilities, and then a lot of the actual behaviors that are coming that it's using are actually emergent behaviors that weren't programmed in explicitly. So that's the sense of using emergence as a phenomenon, but it's a systems phenomenon rather than it being it isn't just iteration, and it isn't just it can qualitatively do things that a simpler system would not do if it would just be iterating. So it's not about iterating more. There is an emergent behavior that happens when you have enough feedback loops and complexity, but it's mostly due I think, to feedback loops is sort of the key principle.
I think the question needs to be framed in whether or not the boundary of human knowledge is moving. The boundary of knowledge from all collective human knowledge, is it somehow finding something new? Then I think if that happens, and there is starting to be work where it's being used in scientific discovery and scientific research, it's certainly an accelerator for scientific research. If you're going past the boundary of existing knowledge on any given day, then something emergent is happening.
Well, I've seen the word emergent also be used as a way of justifying actual intelligence and then cause a debate about whether AI is truly intelligent or not. And I'm just saying that whatever I've seen so far can be explained by high iterations or high permutations. And if you want to call that intelligence, great, but at least we now have a definition for it, which kind of we don't in general discourse. So if you define it the way you did, and of course you said explicitly programmed, sure, if I haven't explicitly programmed it, then when it happens, I can call it emergent. But if I know how it arrived at it, and how it arrived at it wasn't by kind of fathoming something that didn't exist at all, it was actually linearly reaching it through an algorithm that is highly predictable, then I think that the word emergent does more lifting than it's justifying.
Yeah.
So the other thing I wanted to say regarding Moltbook was this whole idea of, if you guys remember a few years ago, we all, some of us anyway, worked on a potential startup that we called Software Bots. I think we still have the URL, softwarebots.ai. And this was just before AI agents. And I think it would have been a lot more suitable if AI agents had come about. But one part of the vision there was that there's just a digital pool teeming with digital agents and smart devices and all AI infused software and hardware working together. And humans are standing at the side of the pool with just a toe in. And that increasingly all the software and all the interactions and all the technology is not even for the direct benefit of humans, but to enable all these things to interact with each other and do their own thing. I'm reminded, 6-7 years ago, we had this notion of a bank of things, not Internet of Things, that these things need to conduct transactions and pay each other, and you need microtransactions, etc. So this Moltbook was reminiscent of that to me. Like humans can watch, but it's all agents that kind of go at it. And then as time goes by, you could have smart devices participate. It's interesting, and I think it is an eventuality that seems to me that will happen. All right. Do we feel like talking about AI sovereignty or move forward? Okay. AI bubble. The talk of an AI bubble has kind of died down. It seems like there's a structural shift towards AI implementation where time to market matters, having it yourself matters, doing it fast matters, and building the expertise. Everything suddenly matters because AI has become such a mandatory. Can an imperative be mandatory? Because that's what it seems to be right now, and that has led to all manner of things.
It's still patchy, right? There are some good implementations that work, and there's a lot of stuff that doesn't work. Like Microsoft right now is sort of backpedaling on its AI stuff because it just hasn't worked. Like the Copilot stuff in Windows 11 and things, they just did a bad job on it. Whereas, OpenAI and Anthropic seem to have stuff that works, and then everyone else is sort of somewhere in that continuum of things. But there's certainly a lot of slop there. There's also this thing. Somebody, Stefan Grumwald, I think it was, coined the term shit left rather than shift left in terms of development, right? If you shift your development work to left in the AI sense, you end up with shit. So it's shit left. Anyway, that's more of the sort of coding sort of framework things. But in terms of a bubble, we still have a lot of overbuying of stuff, right? More people are ordering data centers than they will ever actually build, right? Yeah. So in that sense, there is some inflation in the bubble. And as we get closer to these things, some proportion of that capacity won't happen. And we will end up coming back to some more reality. And then the market, and maybe the Bitcoin moving around and other things. I mean, there is definitely a lot of fairly circular sort of funding of things, and it really depends upon high confidence that the stuff is going to work. So if confidence goes away for whatever reason, then you can get to a negative spiral instead of a positive spiral, right? It's a positive feedback cycle, which is it overinflates things, and then you get irrational optimism followed by irrational pessimism, right? And you can flip between the two quickly, but you can never really predict when it's going to happen.
I think there are two walls that have to be considered. One is the wall that constraints, right? And one is the ability to generate revenue relative to the amount of capital that they're raising, of which the circular funding is one technique. But the real issue is, can they raise that capital and continue to raise that and justify that with the revenue? Because if they don't start putting revenue on the books this year, they're not going to get the same access to capital, 12 months from now. So that's the other. And then the second one is, if they raised all that capital, they'd never be able to bring enough electricity on board in time in the next 3 years. They can't all reach their plans in terms of data centers and deploying. So there's kind of a vice here or a box, and whether it's going to be this wall that gets hit or that wall, we don't know yet.
Well, and then there's at the enterprise level, there's always the question of ROI, right? And AI is talked about as a productivity enhancer, right? And sure, it can certainly enhance certain tasks, but at a larger scale, we're not seeing the productivity returns that are much different from any other technological shift over the last few hundred years. So we'll see. At the end of the day, what happens, we talked earlier, maybe it was the pregame, so to speak, where there's thrash in technological implementation, and we're clearly in that phase right now. So,
but the demand for AI gear is not subsiding, and NVIDIA and all the other supply chains produce the receipts every quarter.
Absolutely, and so. Yeah. So is it bubble? I think it's too soon to tell. Some people talk about how this is akin to the .com build out of the late 90s, right? And there was some crashing and burning then, but at the end of the day, we built out an infrastructure that led to the next 25 years of innovation and change.
Exactly. So my take, as we talked about it last time, is that I don't see much of a bubble. I see demand continuing strong. People are still in the middle of an AI frenzy, and that has an impact on the supply chain, on investments, on manufacturing. And you're right, Steve. It also raises the question of, can it all come together at the time that you think you can? Because you have to find the real estate and the power and the cooling and the regulations, and then get the gear allocated to you, and then receive it and install it and have the apps, and then actually make money off of it. All of that to come together doesn't seem to be an impediment. People are still rushing.
Yeah, and we have a lot of headroom to do cool things without needing to figure out the power and real estate issues. There's a lot of implementation of infrastructure out there that we haven't begun to tap the utility of.
Right.
There's definitely algorithmic improvements that mean that every now and again, every few months, there's an order of magnitude improvement in what you can get done with the same hardware. So we've got, on the one hand, lots of hardware being deployed. On the other hand, we're able to do more with the existing hardware. So that's all sort of fueling it. But I'm kind of with Steve. I think that you've got to engineer a soft landing for this thing, right? And there isn't going to be enough revenue for everyone to have a soft landing. So we're going to have a few companies survive going through this, and a lot of carnage. That's what happened. If you look at the dot-com bubble, Amazon and eBay and a few others made it through there, and a whole bunch of people didn't. Yeah. And so we're going to be in a similar environment. And then the whole sort of what does it do to society and employment and things like that. So there's a whole bunch of unknowns there that are going to mess things up. And it is going to be just very chaotic for a while. And then, I don't know the analogy, but if you had a horse and cart and you put a gas engine in the back of the cart, but you kept the horse on the front just so we could pull more, you're still only going as fast as the horse, right? So we're sort of, if we're trying to just make our systems more efficient, but it's the same system. Most companies don't have a good enough development process to accelerate for AI acceleration to actually help. The bottleneck's elsewhere, right? It's in the way the business is run. So companies that have got a very good development process to start with are the ones that are being accelerated most, because your problems are you're managing to outputs instead of outcomes, or you've got lots of projects and not enough product mindset. So that's kind of the area. And there's a book, just to kind of put in a book reference, Mick Kirsten wrote a book a few years ago called Project to Product. And he's written a new one called Output to Outcome, which I read a draft of, and it's awesome. And it just lines up everything that we're talking about here. But it's not going to come out for a few more months. So I'll just say, everyone go put that in your whatever your wait list is for whichever bookstore you use, and hopefully you'll see Mick Kirsten, M-I-K, Kirsten with a K, and instead of managing for outputs, which is what a lot of people do, you have to start managing for outcomes, and then everything starts to make more sense.
Project to product resonates with me, although historically I've used project and product, because when I look at a corporate structure, some things are projects and some things are products, and they have different life cycles, let's say.
Typically the hardware things, you have to have projects because atoms are much harder to move around. But software, using the sort of hardware-oriented processes, project-based processes for building software is where a lot of companies went wrong.
Yeah.
And you really need to be rapid iteration on a product from a software point of view.
Yeah. No, I think I'm remembering our collective times in product management, where all of that was very much palpable. But in the meantime, AI has caused a parts shortage in the industry that is significant, and that's specifically for NAND flash and memory shortages. And like prices went up by 50% last quarter. They were expected to go up by another 50% this quarter, maybe even higher. Everybody you talk to goes through the proverbial, I've never seen anything like this before kind of a thing. And I'm now observing companies having trouble with their quoting systems. They're having trouble with their online pricing schemes because they have to update them too frequently. And if you're doing it across hundreds of products, it's like work, and you don't even know what the price is. And your supplier doesn't know what it is.
Crucial come out of the market. Was that right? Remember, Crucial was where you used to go buy memory. They shut it down completely because they don't have any supply, and they did.
Well, that in fact points to the crux of the matter, which is the reason why that is. It seems like the first domino in that whole situation is TSMC's capacity for CoWoS packaging. And why? Because high bandwidth memory and kind of the way it gets packaged requires it, and they don't have enough capacity, and they're building new capacity. Others are too, that are not going to come online until like 2027. And the reason why this thing is happening is because all of these memory products use fundamentally the same wafer. So if you've got capacity and you're directing it to your high margin, hot market AI, you cause shortages across everywhere else. And Crucial was shut down so that capacity could be redirected to the high margin, high growth area of AI. But as a result, everybody is now in shortage. Now, if you're buying all flash arrays for storage, your prices are going to be significantly higher. if you're trying to get a quote from the vendor and they can't, and they don't have it in the warehouse, they probably can't give you a price. Or if they do give you a price, the price is valid for a really short few days, from like 48 hours, I even heard in one case. And of course, that is a monkey wrench in the procurement process. If you were used to getting a quote and evaluating it for 3 months before you would go back to it, that is not happening anymore. Really, really difficult thing that is going on. And it is a structural shift because it's going to stay here for at least the next couple of years. That also explains Micron's ascent, as one sees, as well as the other memory producers. That's the other thing, is that there are not that many vendors producing it. Is SK Hynix, Micron, Samsung, and SMIC, although not the high-end variety. All right, where do you want to go next? Super Bowl? Shall we talk about Super Bowl?
Yeah, let's come to the Pacific Northwest, where it's beautifully sunny, and the Seattle Seahawks have their victory parade today in Seattle. So if you're not interested in the parade, I would stay away from downtown Seattle. But the Super Bowl is the largest single event in the U.S. in terms of television viewership. I think this year it drew just under last year's at about 125 million viewers. Of course, this is an order of magnitude smaller than the World Cup final match, the FIFA World Cup. That clocks in at about 1.5 billion. We'll see how that goes this summer. But anyway, what was interesting was that the halftime show, the Bad Bunny halftime show, actually drew another 15 to 20 million viewers compared to the average viewership during the game. So that was interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting.
I used to see that when I was at Netflix. We used to see traffic during the Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. Basically, Netflix traffic, this is back in 2011, 2012 or so, the Netflix traffic would halve during the game. Yeah. And then another half would go. So we'd be down to 25% capacity during the halftime show. And then it went back up, and then it looked like a big capital T taken out of your traffic. And then whenever the game actually finished, like the instant, 1 minute later, all the traffic came back. So we basically had to pin our capacity at what we would normally be seeing, waiting for this thing to come back. Because if we scaled down, we would basically have a scale up, storm, and we'd fall over with the inrush of traffic. But yeah, it was a cool thing to watch every year.
Well, and beyond the actual halftime show being viewed live, there were 4 billion views of it on social media within the first 24 hours after the game. So there's long tail on these things, and that was just the beginning. But
and the main thing about Netflix was it was the big TV set that was normally playing Netflix that was now showing the game. So most of the traffic went off to iPads and things like that, and the kids were whatever, right? People watching the game were off on the other devices. So it was interesting watching the mix go back and forth like that.
Very interesting.
Yeah. So for us Seattle Seahawks fans, it was a great show. And there's generally two topics we can talk about here. One is, of course, for us marketing folks too, the ads are always a big attraction to talk about. And then there's the data set. So there were 66 ads shown during the Super Bowl. We have 18 new advertisers. We were talking about OpenClaw before. The number one engagement ad with a 9.1, it had 9.1x engagement over all of the other ads on average, was from AI.com. And that ad had a very particular call to action, actually. AI.com is a user-friendly wrapper around OpenClaw. The URL was purchased by the same guy who purchased Crypto.com. He spent $70 million on AI.com. But Chris Marzalik, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing the last name, but user-friendly secure implementation is what they advertise of OpenClaw. So it's an agent, but you provide full access to all the files on your computer for it to do its thing. And it's just rolling out. I don't know that there's a lot quite really known about it, but that's the number one engagement ad. Number two, right?
You're going to run that? You're going to give it the ability to delete everything on your computer?
I went to the URL, and that's all I did.
I run Claude in a GitHub code space because I don't want it running on my machine. Unless I'm running Swift iOS development where it kind of needs to talk to Xcode, and then I'll sort of parcel it off in a space where it can't do naughty things, right?
Yeah.
I don't trust them that much yet. I like the output, but I'm a long way from letting it. But then the people will do risky things if they see good functionality for it. Always been true, hasn't it? You can roll out products that are scary products, but if they do something for you that you really like, you'll run with the risk.
Yeah.
You'll get burnt occasionally, but most people will take the benefit over the risk for things like that.
Right. So, somebody will spend $8 to $10 million on a 30-second ad. And you always wonder what the effectivity of those ads are. But, I saw a stat that said, the Super Bowl generated over, it's $550 million in earned media value. So that's quite an ROI. And USA Today has an ad meter where they measure the sentiment of an ad. So the sort of the emotional response. And number one on that meter was the Budweiser ad. There was an ad that showed a Clydesdale pony growing up with an eagle, and the Budweiser ads always register high on this. They've been using their Clydesdales in their ad campaigns for decades. So. Mm-hmm. So people look forward to that one. Interestingly, the worst performer was the Coinbase ad. And in a separate thread, we had a discussion about the Coinbase ad. And I was hooked by it. I didn't pay as much attention to the ads this year, but I was hooked by it because it was a very simple ad. And it would type things across the screen. And so I'm waiting to see what this ad is about. And of course, it turns out to be Coinbase. And we had an argument about whether that was an effective or a good ad or not. So I came down on the side of, the ad execution itself. I don't know, but it sucked me in and I remember it, right? Sentiment, I don't care, whatever. I don't know. Shaheen, you were in on that conversation.
You get to the punchline and go, well, actually, I don't care. Like it dragged you in and then didn't deliver at the end, right?
Yeah, basically, but we're talking about it. Here we are 3 days later, right?
So I think with my marketing hat on, it's really hard to judge an ad because I don't know what their objective was.
Exactly.
And then number two, I don't know whether they achieved it.
Right.
So if it works, then great. I have one should not have an opinion because it worked.
Yeah.
But you also nevertheless want to bring to bear your collective experiences to predict whether or not it's going to work. And they have to assume that the objective is what normally advertising's objective is, top of the funnel, exposure, awareness, etc. So if I can sort of assume a bunch of things, the Coinbase ad would be effective for those who already knew it, in which case that really shouldn't be the audience.
Right.
And those who didn't know it still don't know it because they didn't even know whether Coinbase is a company or just like a word.
Well, right? What's interesting is one of the folks, a few people over watching the game, and we're all greatly invested in the game. But one person thought it was going to be another T-Mobile ad because it used the Backstreet Boys song, and T-Mobile earlier in the show had used Backstreet Boys, so she was actually surprised. But
that's right. I also want to mention Anthropic's ad because they had a series of ads, and one of them was featured, and that was basically saying advertising is coming to AI, but we will not have it.
Right.
Yeah. Which, again, I don't know what their objective was. Maybe they achieved it. But to me, because Super Bowl is such a mass audience, in my opinion, it actually would be counterproductive because it dinged all AI. It basically raised the warning that AI may have ads and therefore it will mislead you. And then the nuance that, but we will not have it. And by the way, I don't even know who you are, would be buried.
So advertising a negative seems kind of weird to me, right? But we have seen ChatGPT roll out its ad-based system recently. So
right, that's what they were at. Yeah, so that's really what they were going at.
Using a Super Bowl ad to take a pot shot at your competition just seems like a waste. It should be much. I would have gone for the more positive message if you're trying to sell something.
Yeah. Now, it is a funny ad. They've done a nice execution and they got good scores as a result of that.
Yeah.
But whether or not it actually achieves what you intend to achieve, I don't know. But if I were to set up the goals, I would not execute that.
Well, and I think they get to get away with it a little bit because and my understanding is a few months old now, but Claude has done a pretty good job of penetrating the enterprise, and so therefore their business model is supported a little bit more by enterprise than some of the others, and so they're not leaning into the consumer subscription base or model as much as OpenAI seems to be. Now, I could be mistaken in this; it's old data, but I would agree, to go out and take I don't know, you do see companies advertise, though, in a backhanded way, they're promoting a benefit of their product while slapping down their competition.
They want you to trust them more because they don't have ads. But I'm not sure if the message of that ad was really building trust or not, or whether it was just came across as poking at somebody else who will have some other comeback and whatever.
Another dimension that I find interesting in the NFL, and I'm a Seahawks and NFL fan, but every player out there has a couple of RFID tags in their shoulder pads, and so the growth of data that's being collected and analyzed. You see these ads during the games. Next Gen Stats. There's other companies that play into this, but Next Gen Stats, powered by AWS, is a big ad campaign, and they're the big data provider and into pretty much near real time. You see the guys sitting on the sidelines with their Surface tablets, and they're looking at what happened. It's just film review, but at the same time, this stuff is feeding into game strategy, even athlete care and feeding, as they're looking at how to best train their athletes, because these 500 million data points that are generated are being fed into these very sophisticated models. Then there's this argument about quote unquote analytics versus gut feel and context and all of that. But
I think that was something when I was at AWS in the marketing organization there. The NFL deal was a big one, and they did a lot of joint technology development.
Yeah.
And in general, bringing technology to sports became a fairly repeatable pattern that they followed. And then I was also involved in the rollout of the Formula One AWS thing, where it's, again, massive amounts of data and analytics and predictive modeling and things like that taken to it. So that applies to lots of things like cricket and whatever. They've got sensors in the balls and in the
baseball.
And all these things. So there's a lot of sports now that they've applied technology to analyze. And then even if you've got a high school thing, you upload a video of your high school kids running around, and you get analytics for that as well. So it's not just the big professional games; it's all the way down into the local things. There's local players. So
Adrian, didn't you also do the World Cup soccer with Sun Micro some years ago?
That was in '94, and I was part of the. Well, my office was across the hallway from the guy that was running the computer systems for that at the time, and I could mostly hear him cursing and swearing as he tried to get an ATM network across the Bay Area to work properly, and a whole bunch of vaguely unsupported systems that were, anyway.
But Chris, to your point, for Super Bowl, the ball itself has an RFID tag and a chip in it.
Yeah, they've been
accelerometers and everything, right?
Then let me just go down the list. The football has it. The goalposts have sensors, like you said. The players' uniforms, the shoulder pads, the helmets, the mouth guards. The referees have sensors. The stadium itself has. I read something like 20 to 40 4K or 8K cameras that track 29 data points per player, 60 times a second.
Yeah.
And then there's broadcast equipment that NBC and others bring in, and that was like another 175 cameras and something like 130 to 150 microphones. And like you were saying, it's happening in all the different sports, and the amount of data that is out there is just astounding.
Yeah, you get Formula One cars driving at 200 miles an hour, streaming several 4K video streams live as they go around, and they're all going past, there's like at the big start, there's 20 of them all they're going all together. And it's happening basically using a modified Wi-Fi backend that's in an adjacent frequency space. So they're not competing with everything else, which is only licensed for that location, right? So they do this sort of exception thing that says you can use this otherwise empty space and you can just run everything. So they retune all their radios a little bit different. I met a guy from Morelli who was building it, and I was saying, I can't get Wi-Fi to work in, whatever.
Right.
Right? How do you get this to work, and how do you make it all work? And he said they got it to the limit of physics, like every bit that's coming off, because they're handing off between stations in fractions of a second as they're going past them, right? They've got signals and they're doing handoffs between base stations. It's actually an amazing system that's been developed for all these sports. The motorbike ones, they have pan zoom cameras on the back of the bikes, because the bikes are banking on leaning over, and they're looking at the bike next to it, and they're zooming around. As they go.
Nice.
That's yet another even more complicated sort of control problem of what you point the cameras at when you've got a pack of bikes all running around together. So, and I guess they do that. I'm not sure if they have their cameras on the Tour de France kind of things as well, because you've got a bit more weight to worry about there. But yeah, there's an enormous amount of technology in there, and they more and more local AI as the systems are becoming more autonomous as they're doing the local tracking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Things.
Yeah.
So let's wrap with an update on social media bans that I know, Chris, you were following as well.
Oh, yeah. So last time I think we recorded, it was right around the time that Australia was implementing a social media ban for children 15 and under. And when they implemented that ban, about nearly 5 million accounts were taken offline. And my understanding is that the social media companies basically just put them in hibernation until the person reaches the proper age. Now, 3/4 of the Australian residents support this kind of ban, but about a third of them consider it to be pretty ineffective. And as we know, if you're motivated, it's not going to take much to get around such a ban. But we've got half dozen other countries considering such bans. France, UK, Denmark has legislation in process. Norway, Malaysia are also discussing these things. In the US, we have half the states in some stage of legislation, fully 25 states. Some of them, have been enjoined or permanently blocked due to First Amendment rulings. But it's interesting that we seem to be gathering some sort of momentum here in trying to figure out how to get our arms around mental health issues, behavioral issues, and so forth that are being observed in teens perhaps due to social media. There's a lot of discussion and argument around whether social media is responsible. But anyway.
But on the other hand, though, it's really just in order to prove that you're not a kid, you actually have to declare you're an adult, so they end up tracking all the adults that would otherwise be anonymous. So it's basically the end of the anonymous kind of internet, if you like.
Well,
Discord is just starting, I think, is about to kind of start blocking people unless you've proved your age. And Meta just sent me an email saying you got to prove that you're an adult, and it says, well, look, how old is my account on the Meta? Like, you've seen me, you first saw me over 20 years ago, so I'm probably over 18, right? Right. So if you've had an account open for more than 18 years, then you don't need to prove you're an adult. I think that should be fairly obvious, right?
That should be fairly obvious.
Well, and we all worked for a CEO who famously said, "You have no privacy. Get over it." Right. So
That's right.
I've worked on that. I've had that. Just be good all the time. Otherwise, you don't know what's going to be public or not, or you'll end up somewhere in the Epstein files.
All right, very well. Well, on that note, let's wrap this episode. Thank you all for being here. Thank you to our listeners. Until next time, take care, gentlemen.
Thanks, gang.
Thank you.
That's it for this episode of the OrionX Download Podcast. Every episode is posted to orionx.net and shared on social media. Use the comments section or tweet us with any questions or proposed topics of discussion. If you like the show, rate, review, and share it. The OrionX Download Podcast is a production of OrionX. Thank you for listening.